AM 800 CKLW, the information station, presents Lynn Martin.
Well, with 2 trips to rehab behind her, Lindsay Lohan again arrested on charges of a DUI and cocaine possession. Her lawyer says addiction is a terrible and vicious disease. We're going to find out if you think it is and if you've dealt with addiction. We know how our younger and younger our kids are when they are experimenting both with drugs and alcohol. As a parent, we're going to find out how you handle it, what you do when you discover your kids are into drugs and alcohol. All right, 519-792-CKLW, 1-800-263-2559. As I said, a couple of trips of rehab behind her, legal problems ahead of her. She joins a long list of Hollywood young people who have faced high-profile battles with drugs and alcohol. Some went on to enjoy healthy lifestyles, healthy careers. Others, of course, have not. They, unfortunately, have died. The latest, as I said, an arrest on suspension of drunk driving and cocaine possession, less than 2 weeks out of rehab. This morning, her parents have come out with very different ideas on how serious their daughter's problem is. Her father, who is no stranger to drinking and driving and drugs himself, says he feels partially responsible for his daughter's downfall. He says she is basically doing the same thing he did. His estranged wife, however, has claimed in the past that her partying is simply normal adolescent behavior. It's typical, she says, of young people to binge drink, to experiment with drugs. Well, as parents, how do we tell the difference between what is normal experimentation and what is addiction? What is a problem? Her lawyer has said she is struggling with addiction, and it is a terrible and vicious disease and obviously can take its toll. Well, joining us right now is Dr. Stanton. He is a licensed psychologist, attorney, practicing psychotherapist, and the author of a number of books and articles on the subject of alcoholism, addiction, and treatment. His latest book is Addiction Proof Your Child. And Dr. Peel, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. You laid out the issues very well, the range of issues that you have to think about in this situation. Young people in the United States, by the time they reach the senior year in high school, half of them have used an illegal drug, but more characteristically, by the time they're 21 and they're still underage drinking, almost half binge drink regularly. It's a regular phenomenon in the United States. It's a part of growing up now. And some of the issues are, can you prevent that in your child? And when and at what point, as I identify in my book, Addiction Proof Your Child, does it become a clinical problem that you need to seek treatment for?
A couple of the issues that we'll talk about, and I do want to talk more about that because obviously it is very, very important, and I think we can learn an awful lot. But when we talk in terms of somebody like Lindsay Lohan and her father saying, you know, I feel partially responsible for this. We have people that say, her lawyer and other people who say this is something that is genetic. You know, it is a disease. What's your stance on that?
Well, I take a non-disease approach for several reasons. Ironically, the most modern genetic research based on the human genome has found some very surprising things. There are really very few individual genes on your DNA. That genetic material interacts in very complicated ways. It's just not possible to simply say, you've got an addictive gene, you don't have an addictive gene. That statement actually makes no sense in terms of genetics. On the other hand, there are very strong differences in backgrounds that do make people more likely to be addicted, or in particular, to drink in a bad way, by which I mean intense binge drinking. It's a quiz question I like to give people. There are 2 countries in Europe that drink about the same amount of alcohol. In one, very few people, 3%, drink every day, but more than half of the people who do drink binge drink. In the other culture, 3/4 of the people drink regularly, but fewer than 10% binge drink when they drink. Mm-hmm. Can you guess what the 2 countries are in Europe that describes?
No, I can't.
Well, the country where binge drinking is something of a cultural characteristic is Ireland, and the country where regular daily drinking without binging is characteristic is Italy.
Italy.
And in fact, there's much more binge drinking in Ireland among young people as well compared to Italy. So it's in the United States, we're faced with a situation where at the age of 21, you're allowed to drink legally. That's going to happen. And the question is, and 50%, according to the United States' own data, of 21-year-olds binge drink at least once monthly. How do you create children who are going to get to that point without binge drinking? That's an issue that parents are faced with, and we don't even actually realize that that's the issue we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that, and I'm looking at a statistic right now that tells us that many girls will have their first drink by the time they're 12, have their first experience of being drunk by age 14.
Well, on average, kids are drinking more and earlier than you suspect as a parent. And once again, the question is, how are you going to deal with that? You can say, well, I've told them a million times never to drink again, and that's official government policy in the United States. You're not allowed to drink until you're 21. It's illegal. However, that law is violated, as your information indicates, regularly. And so what are you going to do as a parent? The typical response probably is to bury your head in the sand and to say, well, I've told them not to drink and wash your hands of it. But that's not really a sensible response. Among the other responses is to allow your child to drink in the home with you, which is how it's done in Italy, but, for example, it's not done in Ireland. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to quickly point out that that's not the same as allowing your children or your teenage son or daughter to give a cake party in your basement that's unsupervised. It's about letting your child share in some wine on a special occasion, a wedding or an anniversary or a graduation. Because the question you have to ask yourself is, when my child turns 21, and actually well before that, of course they're going to go to college at 18 or 19, and they're already binge drinking in high school. A third of high school seniors binge drink. How am I going to teach them something other than that? And you can't throw your hands up and expect anybody else to do it. It's interesting to look at Michael Lohan is now recommending that his daughter, Lindsay Lohan is 21 years old.
Right.
And she's been to treatment, and they said, okay, here's the deal, never drink again. And she says, gotcha, okay, I understand. Then she goes out, and her whole life is built around hanging around clubs. And so that vow, and I believe she was sincere when she made it, lasted less than a week. And let's say that she was the best, to put quote around best, girl in the world. And would she really never drink again for the next 60 years if she lived to be 81 years of age?
So it's very unrealistic when you tell someone at 20, you're never going to be able to drink again. Never drink again.
And Michael Lohan, what kind of an example is he?
Right.
He was in the Betty Ford Center. He finally quit drinking in his 50s when he got a DUI crashing into a pole.
Right.
So what he's giving this message, and he now is creating, he claims, a recovery center based on finding God. So he's saying, and notice this is very much what treatment sounds like in the United States. I have a whole different approach to treatment that I outline in Addiction Proof Your Child. He says, find God, quit drinking. Okay, some people do that. Usually it takes them quite a while to get to that point. And if Lindsay Lohan waits to the time she's 55, like her father, she could be dead,
right,
as he could easily have been killed. So he's recommending a program that really, it represents what he himself has done his whole life, the all-or-nothing approach, which is characteristic of a lot of American thinking, and it's not effective, it's counterproductive.
Okay, so you don't prescribe to the all-or-nothing approach. What do you think is the best way? And I know you've obviously done a lot of research, a lot of work when it comes to addictions. How do you approach addiction?